If any of you guys have seen my top 25 YouTubers, then you would know that I put Nostalgia Critic at number 1 on the list. And I still stand by that. I'm a huge fan of the Nostalgia Critic. So I felt it would only be fitting that I'd do a countdown on him at some point. I mean, come on, Super Mario Logan was only number 9 on the list, and I've already done 5 countdowns on him. I mean, I think it's time I give my actual favorite YouTuber the spotlight. Okay, so here are the rules. While I won't just be taking reviews into account, I'll also be taking old versus new and top 11s into account, I will be discounting editorials. Why? Because I feel that they're very different from his regular reviews. And if I'm gonna be honest, I could probably do an entire list on editorials alone. But before we start, I think there's 2 warnings I should give you. Number 1, everything on this list came out after the revival, so if you don't like modern Nostalgia Critic, you should probably click away right now. And secondly, some of the reviews got taken down from YouTube for copyright, so I had to find other ways to get my hands on them. And just warning you right now, the quality on some of these isn't going to be the best. But even then, that's only the case for a small few of them. But now with all that out of the way, let's get this party started. You know, I really like what Doug's done in recent years with old versus new. The original concept of old versus new was pretty good to begin with, the Nostalgia Critic comparing an old movie with its remake and seeing which one is better. But I think they really took it a step up when they added Hyper Fangirl to the mix. Hyper Fangirl's my favorite character in the series, aside from the Nostalgia Critic himself, of course. Now, as you've probably figured out by the footage, I'm putting the Cinderella one on the list. But if I'm being honest, I was originally considering just putting this on the list as a tie with the Spider-Man one. But in the end, I decided to go with this one for 2 reasons. Number 1, this video has Devil Boner in it being absolutely hilarious. Especially in the fight between him and Hyper Fangirl's former hitman. And secondly, I love the final segment where the Nostalgia Critic does an absolute beatdown of the modern Cinderella, pointing out essentially how everyone looked at her as a strong, independent woman, when in reality she didn't do anything. It's not like I'm biased or anything, I haven't seen either of the movies, nor do I plan to. I just like the way he really went about this segment. I love how he simply starts off calmly asking questions, and then eventually turning it around to point out how none of the answers really make any sense. But like I said before, this one and the Spider-Man one were pretty close. You know, the Nostalgia Critic's musical reviews always tend to feel pretty epic. In fact, this isn't even the only musical review on the list. Just like the other musical review on the list, hint hint, this review features the Nostalgia Critic teaming up with a group of reviewers whom I've never heard of to review the movie. Now, I probably would have appreciated this review more had I seen Phantom of the Opera, either the musical or the movie, but as it stands, it's still pretty enjoyable. Funny enough, the review is actually about putting on a show, which is supposed to be the review. They get a lot of characters involved, whether it be the charts guys, Hyper Fangirl, or the bum. But meanwhile, they have to deal with a poorly singing Phantom who's obsessed with the movie. As you would imagine, this review is a parody of the movie, and they do constantly point out the similarities between the review and the movie, and admittedly at times it can be a bit on the nose. But you know what, I'm fine with it, because the alternative is something like the Hocus Pocus review, where half the jokes are going to go entirely over your head if you haven't seen the movie. Oh yeah, and for some stupid reason in that review, they don't talk about the movie once. But enough ranting on a review that most NC fans agree is terrible, and back to talking about this one. The music in this review is also pretty good. It's not as good as a certain other review down the list, but it's still pretty good. Also, I love how at the end of the review they have both Phantoms singing against each other, telling each other how their singing's terrible. Yeah, this is the part of the review where me needing to find alternate sources becomes a lot more obvious. Recently, I've actually seen both of the Tim Burton Alice in Wonderland films, and I liked both of them, particularly the second one. Despite the critic really hating Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland, I still really liked this review. And if I'm being honest, I think he did make some pretty legitimate points against the movie. The premise of this review is pretty creative. The critic gets his flash drive stolen by a black rabbit and ends up getting sucked into Burton Land in order to find it. There, he meets up with Malice, who's kind of like Alice, if she was a murderer. I really like how well drawn the backgrounds are in Burtonland. It shows that they really put a lot of effort into this. And throughout the review, they poke fun at a lot of different cliches in Tim Burton movies, like how Danny Elfman always does the music, or how Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter are almost always in them. Not to mention the whole It's Tim song really is awesome and does sound like a song that would be in a Tim Burton movie. And of course, pokes fun at even more of his cliches. Also, I like how at the end, after making fun of Tim Burton for half an hour, they do actually give him a legitimate point. I like the whole message about how even good artists screw up sometimes, but they'll always bounce back and make another good thing. Oh yeah, and it was pretty cool seeing Doug Walker's childhood fan drawings of Tim Burton films. One problem that I feel was present in some of the critics' early works is the fact that I don't think it was that good at emphasizing how bad a movie was. Take Garbage Pail Kids, for example. If it weren't for the fact that he said it was the worst movie he ever reviewed, I never would have guessed that from the rest of the review. It just kind of felt like any other review. The reason I brought this up is because his review of Food Fight really seems to fix this. The video manages to set itself apart with just how bad the movie is. I mean, the review literally starts with the critic having a mental breakdown. The review, for the most part, is business as usual, with a lot of the typical jokes you'd expect from a Nostalgia Critic video. But there are certain points where you can see just how bad the movie is shining through. That hilarious joke right before the commercial break where the Nostalgia Critic confesses every bad thing that he's done is probably the most panicked he's been in the entire series. And right afterwards, you see him on the verge of tears right as the screen turns to black. And this is the one review where it shows the critic actually attacking the guy who created the movie. Within the NC universe, I mean. Obviously, he didn't kill the real guy who made the movie. The jokes in this review are pretty funny too. I was pretty much dying of laughter the first time I saw the scene of him imitating the guy from the movie. And at the end of the review, we get a warning from the Nostalgia Critic telling everyone that you should not go check out this movie. Due to the dire seriousness of the warning, coupled with how the internet works, obviously, no one listened. At least to me, the Nostalgia Critic's clipless reviews are really hit or miss. They can be some of the best reviews he's ever made, like the ones that you're going to see on this list. Or they can be some of his worst, like Jurassic World or Hocus Pocus. I thought I'd bring this up now since I'm about to talk about his review of Pixels. Honestly, I think that this review is pretty much the exact opposite of his Jurassic World review. Let me explain. With the Jurassic World review, I really think that being clipless worked against it. Since there's no visuals from the movie, everything is obviously just going to be biased to the way he sees the movie. And the heart of a lot of his complaints were visual and highly exaggerated, even by his standards. With the Pixels review, I really don't think they could have done the ideas that they did well if they were showing clips from the movie. So being a clipless review really worked in its favor. Basically, the gimmick of this review is that he has the Appler Sandler. The joke obviously being that Sandler movies have gotten so formulaic that you can use an app to make them. The clipless style gets used for a lot of things in this review, such as announcing when a typical Sandler cliche pops up, substituting Kevin James for Obama, switching out Sandler's best friend in the movie with Olaf, and of course, the scene where he has Sandler's girlfriend in the movie rant about how the plot makes no sense. Heck, they even have a joke where the critic gets into a fight with Adam Sandler. Really, I don't think this review would have been nearly as good if he had just done it normally. I also like the conclusion at the end when the critic says that the reason people are so mad at Pixels is because of the fact that Sandler for years has refused to move on and try new things. Even though I actually disagree with that conclusion, and I think that the reason why Pixels was much more hated was because a lot more people saw it due to its marketing. With most Sandler flicks nowadays, the only people who really go and see him are the people who like his style of humor and know they're going to like it. While with Pixels, the trailers really made it seem like it was going to be something more and a lot better than most Adam Sandler movies. Plus, the marketing for this movie was everywhere. I mean, I'd never even heard of The Cobbler until I randomly found it on demand. But with Pixels, I can't count the number of commercials I saw for that. Oh, and the song at the beginning. It was hilarious and sounds just like a song that Adam Sandler himself would make. You know, I was really excited when I heard the Nostalgia Critic was doing a Last Airbender review, and I was right to be excited for it, because the review turned out great. For some reason, I just really like watching the Nostalgia Critic talk about Avatar. You see, back when Avatar was on, I watched it here and there, but I never dedicated myself to watching the whole series. Although now that I think about it, I really should at some point. But despite not watching the show that much, even I could tell from the trailers for The Last Airbender that it was going to suck. And keep in mind, this was long before I even knew who the heck M. Night Shyamalan was. But anyway, back to the Nostalgia Critic. I really think the reason I like watching him talk about Avatar is because there's a real passion behind it. I mean, it is Doug's favorite TV show of all time. Throughout the review, he really did a good job comparing the movie to the show. I think the most important part is the fact that it's actually legitimate complaints. It's not just some fanboy whining about how things are different, it's pointing out how M. Night Shyamalan completely missed the point of the original show. And you know, just kinda made a bad movie in general. Also, I think the spoof of the show's intro that they did at the beginning was pretty hilarious. I also like how they managed to cram the entire events of the original show into just a 1-minute song. A real quick and easy way to catch up anyone who hasn't seen the show. I also think that the parodies they did of Avatar and The Legend of Korra were pretty funny, albeit not quite as elaborate as some of the parodies that the critic would go on to do. I also like the message at the end of how, despite the fact that the movie's terrible, you still have the original show to go back to and enjoy. The Batman vs Superman review. Where do I begin with this one? First off, I'll say that this is the most I've laughed at a Nostalgia Critic review in a long time. And granted, a lot of it is because of the fact that I have seen the movie. But it's not like the Hocus Pocus review where all the jokes are going to go over your head if you haven't seen it. The jokes are still funny enough for anyone who hasn't seen the movie. But some of the jokes are at their funniest if you actually have seen the movie. Like it makes fun of how many dream sequences there are, or how Wonder Woman just randomly appears throughout the movie. I also love how they portrayed Zack Snyder in this. He's just hilarious. They make him out to be as ridiculous as possible. I also like how they made fun of Jesse Eisenberg's performance, making him super over the top and ridiculous in this. I also like how they pointed out that he is essentially the Joker and not Lex Luthor like he's supposed to be. The way they built up to it was really clever, and while I never noticed it when I was watching the movie, they're totally right! And seeing Nostalgia Critic and Angry Joe team up for this review again was really nice. The Man of Steel review, which was the other one that they collabed in, was also pretty good. But this one had the same charm and is also funnier and shorter. Aside from the jokes, I also really liked Angry Joe's rant towards the end of it. He basically tears Zack Snyder apart for killing off Superman way too early and not giving Superman's death the respect that it deserves. It was a pretty dramatic way to end such a funny review, but you know, it really worked. Also, I liked the times when they pointed out that a lot of the stuff really didn't make much sense. And here we are at the other musical review that I not so subtly hinted at during the Phantom of the Opera entry. So what makes this review better than the Phantom of the Opera one? Well, for one, I think it just feels big. This is probably the most amount of people that the Nostalgia Critic has managed to get involved in a review. Keep in mind I said review. The anniversary films don't count. One of the nice things that this review does is that it manages to spoof every single one of the major songs in Les Miserables. Also, I love how they had Brentalfloss represent Javert and be the villain because of the fact that he sings like Russell Crowe. Also, I think that Les Miserables is just a piece of media that I enjoy watching parodies of. I mean, The Awesomes did a parody of Les Miserables, and I loved that too. Now, you would think going into this that I was a huge fanboy of Les Miserables, but actually no. I'd just seen the posters, I'd never seen the movie, and I've never even heard of the play until this review. And not so long after seeing this review, I was willing to go see a performance of Les Miserables, and I loved that too. You know what they say, there's nothing like an angry, foul-mouthed internet personality to get you into classic Broadway theater. Okay, I just made that up, but hey, it's true in my case. Aside from that, I don't even know what else to say. It was a huge review that got a ton of people involved, and you could tell they put a ton of effort into. I really don't think much more needs to be said. Typically, I'm not the biggest fan of when the Nostalgia Critic dedicates an entire month to something, but Matrix Month I really had to make an exception. Really, the Nostalgia Critic's reviews of the Matrix trilogy just feel epic. Throughout each of them, he did a lot of entertaining and really funny sketches to satirize the movies. I still love how the Agent Smith parody refers to him as Mr. Alja Critic. I mean, the Nostalgia Critic's conversation with Black Willy Wonka was one of the few things in the entire show that actually made me feel suspense, as if I was being being left on a cliffhanger. And the conclusion at the end of the last one really felt epic. Plus I like that they gave Chester A. Bum a big role in it. I also think that in the first one it was really clever how the whole secret resistance was the group of people who didn't like the Matrix. I also like how he destroyed the Agent Smith parody by pointing out a plot hole in the Matrix that no one seemed to notice. Now, I've never seen the sequels, but with the original Matrix, my opinions on it are very similar to my opinions on Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland. I still enjoy it, but I also think that the critic brought up a lot of legitimate points against it. I was originally going to put this trilogy higher on the list, but then I realized that there were 6 reviews that I liked better than it. You know, for a while, The Cat in the Hat was my favorite Nostalgia Critic review. As you can tell, it's not my favorite anymore, but for a while, it was. So what made this review my favorite for a while? For one, it featured my 2 favorite supporting characters at the time, Satan and Evelina. I'm not kidding, it's because of these 2 characters that I was so quick to get on board with the critic doing sketches in his videos. The review also has a character named Peter Solis, who is essentially the one who made all the Dr. Seuss movies, and is obsessed with pandering to the lowest common denominator in order to make a profit. And throughout the review, he constantly brags about all the pandering updates that he made to the Cat in the Hat. My personal favorite of those moments has to be towards the beginning, where he makes a bunch of hilariously terrible uses of modern teen slang. I still have the scene at the beginning where Evelina gets all confused by the Cat in the Hat because the only version that she knows is the Mike Myers version. And of course, who could forget the introduction of the analysts? The joke about these guys is that they're obsessed with charts and statistics, to the point that when the critic turns off the charts, they both kill themselves because they don't know what to do. And of course, who could forget the scene at the end where the critic points out that Solis got everything backwards about making an adaptation, and that Dr. Seuss's work is a lot more than just simple kids' books. While I think that Nostalgia Critic has had better passionate speeches as the series has gone on, for when this came out, this was freaking fantastic. Like I said earlier in the video, I like watching the critic talk about Avatar. And while I liked watching him talk about how bad the M. Night Shyamalan movie is, I like watching him talk about how good the show is even more. And it's funny, for me this video is like a sledgehammer to the face telling me that I need to go marathon this show. You can tell there's a lot of passion behind it, and the critic is very well worded in why he likes each episode. But of course, that's only half the video. The other half is a bunch of really intense and funny segments with the critic running away from Dante Bosco. Cause long story short, the critic did a video of the worst Avatar episodes the previous week, so now Bosco's out for blood. They come up with some pretty creative scenarios for the fight sequences, such as taking the fight to Barnes & Noble and even the comment section of the video. Also, there's a pretty good running joke with the critic constantly dismissing Tamara because she's never seen the show. It's kind of funny, in this video I kinda got disappointed whenever he switched from a fight sequence to talking about the show or vice versa. But the disappointment didn't last long considering how both were really well done. At first when I watched this I was kinda confused as to who Dante Bosco was. Was he another reviewer? Why hadn't I heard of him? So I looked him up and it turns out he's the guy who voiced Zuko in the show. Which I gotta say, it's pretty impressive that Doug managed to get one of the voice actors from the show to guest star on his review of it. Now I know this isn't the only time that he's gotten someone who's involved in something famous to be a major guest star in one of his videos, but as far as I know it is the first. Yeah, The Cat in the Hat isn't the only Dr. Seuss review on this list. The Lorax is on here too. Well, I guess I'll start at the beginning. The review starts with a pretty dark parody of The Giving Tree, which is there to demonstrate the complete hypocrisy between the message of the Lorax and how the film was marketed. The review is essentially a parody of the Lorax, the original, not the movie. Critic essentially goes up to the charts guys and does the review in order to point out just how wrong the movie was. Kind of like how in the book and the original animated short, the Lorax goes up to the Onceler in his big factory to point out how what he's doing is really damaging the environment. And several times throughout the review, similar to how the Lorax shows the Onceler how his stuff is damaging the environment, the Nostalgia Critic shows the charts guys how their movie is damaging the public. Thanks to these segments, this review is actually pretty somber and serious by Nostalgia Critic standards. The one that hit me the hardest was when he talked about focusing on being good rather than being popular. About, while ideally you want both, if you have to pick one, you should always always pick good, because if you only do popular, then once people move on to the next popular thing, there'll be nothing good to bring them back. While this review is more somber than most Nostalgia Critic reviews, that doesn't change the fact that it's still pretty funny. Black Willy Wonka had a couple funny lines, but even that's not the highlight of the humor in this video. This is the video that introduced Hyper Fangirl, and she was hilarious throughout, and keep in mind, it was her performance in this video that led to her coming back in a bunch of other videos and essentially becoming a mainstay on the show. I mean, I think she's appeared in more reviews than any other character aside from the Nostalgia Critic himself and maybe the Bum. Obviously, I'm not counting the numerous times when Malcolm and Tamara have played themselves. What else is there to say about this review? It managed to effectively work with a different style and introduce one of the most popular characters on the show. What's not to like about it? Remember when I said that the Nostalgia Critic's Pixels review was essentially the opposite of his Jurassic World review? Well, I think that applies the same here. I think that his Mad Max Fury Road review is the opposite of his Hocus Pocus review. This review is just plain awesome. It's one giant hilarious car chase. The review is essentially 90% sketches, but since the sketches are all good, it's fine. Unlike Hocus Pocus, they actually do talk about the movie throughout the review, as opposed to just at the end. Another thing different with this review than with Hocus Pocus is the fact that with Hocus Pocus, a lot of the jokes you're not going to get if you haven't seen the movie. This review, they give you just enough information so that you get all the jokes. Just enough information to figure out what's going on. Isn't that what they said that Fury Road did? I don't know that them giving just enough information for you to understand what's going on, but not so much that it's overkill, was even intentional, let alone meant to mirror Fury Road. But either way, I still think it's pretty clever. One of the clever things in terms of withholding information is the fact that if you've never heard of Mad Max, then you wouldn't even know the "what a lovely day" line from this review. Not kidding, they don't say it once. Might seem kind of contradictory on my part, but I'm fine with a couple in-jokes for those who have seen the movie, so long as the entire review doesn't feel like one giant in-joke for only those who have seen the movie. Since this is such a story-heavy, epic review as they call it, I think I should go over the story. The Nostalgia Critic's kidnapped by a guy named Impractical Joe for not liking Mad Max Fury Road as much as everyone else does. He escapes with the help of a woman named Curiosa, and as they're driving away, they discuss the Mad Max series. Meanwhile, they're being chased down by Impractical Joe, who has a bunch of over-the-top weaponry at his fingertips. And Devil Boner's working with him. That's always a plus. Also in on the chase is the Tom Hardy fan club led by Hyper Fangirl. And just one more for good measure, they also have the Meninists involved in the chase. Now, I know that Meninism is a joke hashtag and that Doug's probably unfairly strawmanning a bunch of people and blah blah blah. I really don't care. These guys are too hilarious to make a big fuss about. The whole episode's just an action-packed and hilarious chase that ends up concluding when the Nostalgia Critic realizes that Fury Road's the better movie because of the Roadrunner cartoons. The funny part is, once he says it, and even when he starts to explain it, it sounds completely ridiculous, but once he's fully explained it, it makes perfect sense. This review really was a fun, hilarious joyride. The only question is, which two reviews can beat it? From the moment I saw the Nostalgia Critic's review of the Michael Bay Ninja Turtles movie, I knew it was one of his best. I should probably start off with the most obvious reason why, the fact that it's a collaboration with the Angry Video Game Nerd. I'm well aware of the fact that this isn't the first time that they've teamed up together, but it is the first time in a while that they've teamed up together. And I gotta say, it is nice having the Nostalgia Critic and the Angry Video Game Nerd's signature styles of humor in the same video. Basically what happens in the review is while they're reviewing the Michael Bay Ninja Turtles movie, they've also been sent on a mission by Santa Christ to find the heart of the Ninja Turtles. Throughout their journey, they make fun of all manner of Ninja Turtles, whether it be the original cartoon, the video game, the concerts, whatever. They have a running joke about how April O'Neil's constantly in danger, and they make fun of the fact that Shredder tries to take over New York using ninjutsu despite the fact that the cops have guns. Not to mention just poking fun at the Ninja Turtles all over the place. Now, I'm not the biggest Turtles fan, I've only seen the Nickelodeon show and the Michael Bay movies, but I thought a lot of the jokes in this were really funny. And at the end, it is kind of a sad moment when they find out that the Ninja Turtles were just made to sell toys. But I do like the idea that they pointed out that while it was initially made just to be a blatant cash grab, The passion of the fans made it so much more than that. And for the sake of making no sense whatsoever, I think I'll end this entry by talking about the beginning of the video, the intro. Just like in the last Airbender video, it's just a good parody of the show's intro. Now with all that, I bet you're wondering what can beat it. It seems like nothing could, and in fact, nothing can. I lied to you, this is only a top 14, this is number 1. Nah, I'm just kidding. Now for the actual number 1. Now, this is a bit of a weird situation, because number 1 on this list isn't actually one video, it's 6. Now, I bet you're confused by this, but when you see what I'm talking about, you'll get it. But without any further delay, number 1 is the commercial specials. All of them. Now I know what some of you may be thinking. In a web series full of elaborate sketches, crossovers, and musical reviews, how can the best videos be the ones where it's just a guy making fun of commercials? To that I say, you really haven't seen these videos, have you? I know it sounds ridiculous to say it, but the commercial specials are something I look forward to on the show every year. The closest parallel I can think of is how you probably look forward to election years if you're a big fan of Saturday Night Live. But enough explaining, let's get into why these specials really are something. One of the nice things about these specials is that you get a lot of variety. Since the videos keep moving from commercial to commercial and each commercial's different, what the critic's making fun of keeps getting changed up. He could be making fun of TMNT really selling out 1 minute and the intro to HBO the next minute. But really, I think the thing that makes these reviews special is the nature of commercials in general. With movies, things need to add up and tell a coherent story. Well, I guess not a lot of the movies that the critic reviews, but that's beside the point. Commercials exist in an entirely different realm of reality and logic. Cause for a commercial, all it really needs to do is entertain you for 30 seconds and try to get you to buy whatever product it's pushing. Due to this, things don't logically need to make sense and can get pretty ridiculous. Not to mention, since commercials are the things that a lot of people skip or go to the bathroom during, a lot of the over-the-top insanity ends up getting forgotten. And all these factors combined create the perfect storm for an awesome Nostalgia Critic video. To me, the Nostalgia Critic is at his absolute funniest in these videos. Each video is packed to the brim with memorable jokes and is an important part in a complete joke diet. Remember when I said that the Batman vs. Superman review was the most I laughed at a Nostalgia Critic video in a long time? That long time was the time span between that video and the last commercial special. Even Doug Walker himself said he wished he could have included more jokes from the commercial videos on his favorite jokes list. I know there's obviously more factors to consider when it comes to judging a Nostalgia Critic review, but at the end of the day, the show is mostly centered around comedy. And at least to me, these are the funniest videos that the Nostalgia Critic has to offer. I'm not saying that the other Nostalgia Critic reviews are unfunny, because obviously that's not true. These videos just have the most variety, the most memorable jokes, and are always something I can look forward to every year. Despite being about commercials, ironically enough, these specials are definitely the ones that you do not want to skip over. I'm the Nostalgia Critic. Wait, no I'm not. I'm Defoffilizer, and be sure to let me know in the comments of the video what your favorite Nostalgia Critic videos are. Bye!